What's going on, you guys, and welcome to the channel. Hope everybody's having a fantastic week so far. Today we're going to be taking a look at an old school DDR2 AMD platform. I was able to save this from the e-waste pile. Not only did I get this system, but I got several other systems as well. 7 to be exact. So we have plenty of content for the next couple weeks, you guys. I don't know the specs on this thing. I know it's AMD because of the cooler that it has. It is definitely a DDR2 system. I don't know if it works, but I can tell this thing definitely needs some rehab. It is not in the best shape at all. With that being said, we're gonna go ahead, get into today's video, see what we're working with, and see if we can get this thing up and running, try some games on it, and see how it performs. All right, so this is our system that we are going to be looking at. Again, this thing, it's definitely got some cosmetic issues. There's definitely a little bit of rust on top. There's a lot of scrapes, scratches, a couple dents here and there. I'm not entirely sure what kind of system it is, but I'm assuming by the motherboard that this is some kind of Asus pre-built. So we do have an Asus motherboard. We do have 2 sticks of DDR2. It looks like more OCZ DDR2 RAM. Not sure what the speeds are on this thing, but we are definitely going to be upgrading the RAM on this so that it can at least handle Windows 10. So our cooler is pretty dirty, but we do have a nice aftermarket cooler, so we should be looking at pretty good temps. Of course, as usual, we are going to be repasting this, getting new thermal paste on here, and get our temps as low as possible. We do have a tiny little 60 or 80 millimeter fan back here. This thing is tiny. It looks like it should be enough to suffice for this system, but until we see temps, we're not going to know for sure. So aside from all that, if you take a close look here, you will see that off the power supply, we have some wires that were snipped here. So I'm thinking that these are probably for a SATA connector. I don't know why somebody would cut these, but they did. Regardless, we are going to test this thing in the state that it's in, see if we can get picture on the screen, and as usual, we are definitely going to be tearing this thing apart, giving it a nice good clean, and see what else we're working with here. I'm curious to know what kind of graphics card we're working with, along with our CPU as well. I hope we got something good, but you never freaking know. Let's go ahead, get this thing hooked up, and dig into this. Alright, so we got this old gal all nice and hooked up and ready to go. I do have my wires from that power supply all nice and separated to prevent any kind of shorts. So hopefully it actually still works. I don't know why those cables have been cut. That's honestly something I've not seen before. So without further ado, let's see if we can get this thing to actually power on and at least get us into the BIOS. Alright, so we do have power. We do not have an LED ring around here like we should. I have a feeling this is supposed to light up. But regardless, it does give us picture on the screen. So we're gonna go ahead, see if we can't get into the BIOS here. Alright, so we were able to get into the BIOS, and it looks like we're actually running a pretty damn good CPU. We're looking at an AMD Phenom 9850 quad core. So if I'm not mistaken, this released right around 2007, 2008. So obviously, you know, we're hitting almost 20 years old at this point, but still not a bad CPU for its time. Actually, this was great for its time. We're gonna go ahead and get into our hardware monitor and see what kind of temps we're running. All right, so we are into our hardware monitor here, and it looks like our CPU is running pretty warm. This makes me uncomfortable just being in the BIOS. We're looking at almost 44°C. It kind of teeters between 42 and 44, but that is definitely not particularly acceptable. So we're definitely going to be repasting this as per usual. We are running 4 gigs of 800 megahertz DDR2 OCZ RAM. So I do have quite a few kits of OCZ RAM. So we will definitely be able to at least get this thing up to 8 gigs. And that's definitely, that's going to help us run Windows 10 much smoother. Aside from that, one thing I notice, our fan back here is not spinning. It looks like it is not hooked up. And then there's also a weird noise coming from our PSU. It's a super low hum. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that or not, but So we're gonna get this thing laid out on the operating table and start tearing this thing apart. All right, so we got this thing laid down on the operating table. We're going to go ahead, we're gonna get this GPU out of here. I wanna see what kind of graphics card it is that we are working with. All right, so we got our card out. It looks like we are working with a Galaxy Nvidia GeForce GT 520 1GB DDR3. This thing is old school. If I am not mistaken, this thing came out right around 2011. It's a little bit newer than our CPU, but still. And this thing doesn't even have a fan on it. So I'm curious to see what this thing can do. Can this thing even run any games? We're definitely going to find out. If I can't get a good result, we are definitely going to be swapping this out for a different graphics card, because I can almost promise you that this thing is gutless. But definitely cool. This is definitely a good score. This might just end up going on my GPU wall. Let's go ahead and start tearing apart the rest of this thing and see what else we're working with in here. Okay, so I'm trying to get this other RAM module out of here, and it is actually stuck underneath our cooler here. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this fan real quick and then see if we can get that other DIMM out. All right, so there's our fan, and look at this, folks. This thing is freaking nasty. Oh, that is so gross. It is going to be a pain in the butt cleaning this thing out. But with that, we can actually get access to our other DIMM, and it does look like we are, in fact, dealing with an OCZ 4 gig kit here. This is PC2 8500. It looks like these are running at 800 megahertz, which is not too bad. Got some hair stuck to it here. But I do have some other OCZ RAM to actually match these, so we will at least be able to get 8 gigs of RAM in this thing. All right, next up, we're going to go ahead. We're going to get our motherboard out of here. We also need to get this video card out of here, which I'm not even sure what this is. So we're going to get this out and see what exactly we're dealing with. All right, you guys, so it looks like we are dealing with an Asus TV7133. This would have been a card that you would use to hook up to your TV. Obviously, it has our AV cable support here, so you can watch, TV, movies, what have you. Whatever you decide to use this for. Pretty cool. You don't see a lot of PCs that come with this these days. It's definitely very crusty and dusty, so hopefully we can get this thing nice and cleaned up. So we'll go ahead, we'll set this off the side and continue with deconstruction of our PC here. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get our cooler out of here, or our fan, our very disgusting fan. So next up, we are going to go ahead and unplug everything from the motherboard, get our screws out, and get this thing out of here. Alright, so we have all of our connections from the power supply disconnected from our motherboard. Let's go ahead and get our screws out. Alright, so we have all of our screws out of here. We should just be able to lift this thing right on out of here if I can get these cables out of my way. Alright, so we have our motherboard out, and check this disgustingness out. This thing is damn near completely plugged up. It's matted, it's so old and so much. That is horrendous. Oh my god. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to set our case off to the side here, and we are going to do our best to get this thing cleaned. Look at that. Even at the bottom of this thing, it's caked on there. You can't even see the metal behind this dust. Just, oh my god. Let's get this thing moved out of the way, and let's get our cooler off of here and get this thing cleaned off. Okay, so we got our motherboard removed. We're going to go ahead, we're going to get our cooler off here, and I'm probably going to take this outside to actually clean it. There's not a lot of times that I have to take this stuff outside, but this is just, it's so bad that, yeah, this is going to have to go outside and be cleaned. This is just, I'll probably take a hose to it even and just do my best with this thing. Probably one of the worst cooler situations I have ever seen. So let's go ahead and detach this thing real quick from our motherboard. And again, just look at this. This is just, how do you neglect something this bad? I'm surprised the temps were as good as they were with this. This is absolutely insane. Not to mention, we have virtually no thermal paste on here. Look at this CPU. It is so old and crusty and dusty. I don't know how this thing was being cooled at all. So I'm going to go ahead, run this cooler outside real quick and get it cleaned off, and I will be right back with you guys. That is absolutely just insanity. So we have this thing all nice and cleaned out. There's still a little bit of remnants of water and whatnot in here. Of course, by the time this goes back in, it's going to be nice and dry. It does look a crap ton better. It's got a little bit of blemishes here and there. Obviously, probably going to be from the age. Aside from that, we did get our little shroud here nice and cleaned off. And then we are going to be going with a different fan as well. This is a Cooler Master. I believe this is like a 60 mil fan. Nothing fancy, but enough to keep this cool. That red fan had a little bit of bearing noise to it. I didn't particularly like that. Not to mention, it is literally stained from the years and years of dust buildup on that thing. So I think that this is going to be a perfect fit for our build. So we're going to go ahead, get this reassembled, get our CPU nice and cleaned off, get some new thermal paste on there, and start getting our motherboard nice and prepped to go back into the case. Alright, so we have our fan nice and mounted right there. Next up, we're going to go ahead, clean off our CPU here, and get some new paste on here and get this thing remounted. So as per usual, go with a little bit of IPA, 91% alcohol, and just dab our paper towel a little bit here and get this thing nice and cleaned off. Alright, and she cleans up beautifully. So before we get our cooler mounted back on here, I do want to note one thing. I did go ahead and clean off the motherboard as well. It's nice and dusted and ready to go. We are going to go ahead and stick some RAM in here first. Our cooler, it blocks us from being able to install the RAM, so we are going to go ahead and do our RAM first. Alright, so there's our RAM. Let's go ahead and get some thermal paste on here and get our cooler back on. Alright, so that looks like a nice, good, hefty amount. Probably too much, but never gonna hurt anything. Let's go ahead and get our cooler back on. Alright, so we got our cooler on. We are going to go ahead and set this off to the side and move on to our case. Alright, so now that we have our motherboard prepped and ready to go back into the case, we are going to go ahead, we're going to pull the fan out, and then we're going to pull out this power supply. I would like to see if this thing is still usable. Alright, so here is our fan, and she is definitely crusty and dusty. Give this thing a nice good clean off camera, but for now, we're going to go ahead and move on to our power supply. Alright, so here is our power supply. So we're looking at a 400 watt max PSU here by Rosewill. Has no particular rating on it. However, I've had a good experience with these. They tend to be rather reliable. We have a little bit of dust, nothing too bad. Honestly, the inside looks phenomenal compared to the rest of the system. But our main issue here is going to be these snipped cables. So I'm just going to feed these through this little band that we have around our wires here. So based off the color coding from what I'm seeing, this does in fact confirm that this was most likely for a SATA connection. Again, I don't know why somebody would go and do this. It's really bizarre to see something like this. I've never seen this in all my years of working on PCs. So very, very bizarre. So for now, I'm going to say that this PSU is probably reusable. We're just going to be limited as to how many SSDs or hard drives we're going to be able to actually put in this system. But I always use a 1 terabyte anyways, so it should be fine. I would not recommend anybody do this. I'm going to be doing this for testing purposes only. If I were to ever sell or give away this computer, I would absolutely do away with this PSU. So for now, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to set this off to the side. I will be taping these off or capping them off. Whatever it is that I have on hand, I'm going to at least do what I can to protect this thing from a possible short or any of these wires making contact when they should not be. So we'll go ahead and set this off to the side. We'll be getting a cleaning off camera. But let's get back to our case. Okay, so next up is getting our front panel off here. I want to see what kind of mess we're dealing with up there, and depending on how bad it is, give it a nice good cleaning. I mean, obviously this whole thing is going to be getting a nice good cleaning, so let's go ahead and get this panel off. Wow, that actually came off really easily. Usually these things are pretty explosive. Alright, so not a crap ton of dust. It's actually not too bad. There's more cobwebs in here than there are dust. So let's see what our front looks like. Oh, we got some stuff rattling around on the inside here. Alright, looks like we had a couple loose screws. That's never a good thing. Alright. Definitely not too shabby. This thing's just going to need a quick little dusting and it should be good to go. So, off camera, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get this stuff all nice and cleaned off and get this thing prepped to go back together. Alright, so we have this old gal all nice and cleaned up. I cleaned her up about as good as she is going to get. We definitely have some rust coming through the paint up here, which obviously it's not removable, so. But it definitely looks a crap ton better than it did before. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to start getting this thing back together. When I come back, this thing will be ready to test. Alright, so we have this thing all put back together, hooked up, and ready to go. Man, she looks freaking awesome. Obviously, there's not a lot of room for cable management here, but I will go through and zip tie some of this down to at least pretty it up a little bit. But for now, this should work how it is. Regardless, this thing looks damn good. She looks ready to go. So we're going to go ahead, try and power this thing on and see what happens. Alright, so it does seem like that fan is just spinning full speed. Hopefully we can change that in the BIOS. That is going to get very annoying. And we do have picture on the screen here. Alright, and we are into the BIOS. Let's see if we can't turn the fan speed down real fast. So in our hardware monitor, we are definitely running a little bit better temperature. Not a huge improvement considering that we just repasted it, but it should be fine. Let's see if we can't change the speed. So unfortunately, I do not see a way to change our fan speed. Not too sure what's up with that. Maybe that's just how this BIOS is. Unfortunately, these older BIOSes don't have a ton of options. But we're going to go ahead, we're going to send it. We're going to get Windows installed onto an SSD, and we're going to test some games. Alright, you guys, so I went back and I made a couple revisions here. I did end up finding a much quieter fan off of an old Wraith AMD cooler that I had lying around. And then the graphics card that we had in here, this GT 520, this thing was so disgustingly slow, it would get no more than 15, maybe 20 FPS on Heaven benchmark. This thing's meant primarily just for web browsing. Like, this thing could not do hardly any gaming at all. I decided to go ahead and stick in a GTX 1050. This is a 2 gig card. This should do our CPU plenty of justice here. So I'm hoping that this is going to get us some performance to actually see what this system can do. So with that being said, I'm going to download a couple games and see what this old gal can do. Alright folks, so we are into World of Warcraft 2, and we are getting relatively good FPS. But I would say, considering the age of this game, 400 FPS is actually not as impressive as I thought it was going to be. So this is a quad core, so I was actually expecting way better results out of this thing, and then we just lost our monitor here. So I've also been having that issue as well, where my hardware monitors just, they keep on closing out, disappearing. So we're just gonna have to wing it. We saw that we were obviously getting right around 400 FPS. The last dual core that I did got double and a half that FPS. So not entirely sure what's going on with this thing. It just, honestly, it's super slow, it's laggy. Definitely not my best build. But of course, what am I gonna do? You know, I can't control that. So we're gonna do our best here. We're gonna see what this thing can do and see what all it can't do. So we'll just get some quick little gameplay here and see if we can't get into a fight, and then we will move on to our next game. And right off the bat, oh, we just whooped that guy's butt. Well, that was quick and easy. That is not what she said. Alright, looks like that's about the boundary of the map. So, obviously, definitely runs older games. No issues here at all. Again, I was expecting a little bit better performance, but who's going to complain? We're going to move on to our next game. Alright, so next up, we are going to be checking out Diablo 3. So far, sitting here, we're running just under 50 FPS. We're looking at 100% utilization on our CPU, but we're only looking at about 30% utilization on our GPU, which indicates we obviously have quite a bottleneck going on here. Again, we are running a GTX 1050 2 gig graphics card, so that just goes to show how weak this CPU is. You know, I was definitely expecting a little bit more out of this thing. But anyways, we'll go ahead, we'll get some gameplay, and we'll see if we can't get into a battle or two and just see how this will run with some added textures. And oh, and we have completely lagged out. He's kind of just stuck in motion there. Alright, so now we're back to normal. And then we're not back to normal, and now it is stalled again. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say early on that this is definitely not one of those meant for heavy gaming. Although this is not necessarily a heavy title, I am still surprised at the fact that it's not running this game very well. Kind of a huge bummer. As we're about to enter battle right here, it stalled me out again. Alright, looks like we are back to gameplay here. Yeah, we're definitely getting a lot of lag, a lot of hitching. Yeah, this system is just, it's not happy. So with that, we are going to go ahead and try another game and see what happens. So far, pretty disappointing. Alright, so on to our next game. We are in The Long Drive. So typically this is a pretty easy game to run, and I'm going to tell you right now that this thing is not running it very well at all. I wouldn't even say that this would be a playable experience. I have all textures, draw distance, everything turned all the way off. Everything's off. You literally visually cannot even enjoy the game. So we're hovering right around 30 FPS. I do have it locked at 40 FPS in hopes to improve stability, but it looks okay. It is running the game, but we definitely get some lag spikes here, a little bit of hitching here and there. And the faster you go, the worse it gets. So I would definitely say that this is not a usable experience. However, if you're on a very tight budget and desperate to play this game, or older games, of course, then this would be the system for you. You could build a system like this for right about, $100. Pretty cheap. But in today's market and day and age, this is not where it's at. Definitely not acceptable. So, it is what it is. Can't win them all, you guys. So what did we learn in today's video? More cores does not always mean more performance. I've tested dual cores that performed light years better than this thing. I'm just, honestly, I thought with the quad core that this thing was going to kick some major ass, and just, I'm so disappointed. Of course, I'm going to try a few other things, maybe try a different SSD, but the SSD that I have in there is brand new. The kits of RAM are relatively new. This thing, in my opinion, it's just, that's the performance that you're going to get out of this platform. Is what it is. Again, you can't win them all. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'll catch you all in the next one. Stay safe in the world.